Hey there, welcome back to the Complicated Kids podcast. I'm your host, Gabriele Nicolet. I am a toddler whisperer, a speech therapist, and a parent coach. And today I'm joined by Dolin. Anne, welcome.
Thank you so much.
We are going to talk all about the homeworks, but tell the good people a little bit about yourself, who you are, what kind of work you do, and all of that.
Sure. Well, I'm a former Fairfax County special education teacher. And on the side, when I was a teacher, I would drive to kids' homes and tutor them. And I realized over time, like that was my calling in life, helping kids one-to-one. So I ended up leaving my teaching job. This was back in 1998. And I started my company, Educational Connections. So we've been in business for 27 years. We serve kids on a one-to-one basis, all virtually now. And we primarily work with students that have either a diagnosis of ADHD or just like have some generic executive function weaknesses. And they're just having a harder time in school than maybe they should be having.
Okay, well, you brought up the magic word, executive function. And so without doing a deep dive,
Yeah.
let's talk about, maybe we'll talk about how does executive function play with homework?
Oh my gosh, it's everything with homework. Executive function Gabrielle, there's so many facets to it, but your ability to say to yourself as a student, okay, I need to get this math homework done. All right, number one, what exactly do I have to do? Let me find that in the first place. So your ability to be organized, to prioritize, I should do this first. And then to get started on the work, to initiate the task and really to see it through fruition. Can you make yourself focus on it, especially if you do not like math? Your ability to regulate your attention, not the ability to pay attention, but to regulate it. Those are all executive functions. And then once you actually finish it, can you put it in a place where you can find it the next day when your teacher says, all right, everybody, take out your homework. Those are all executive functions.
And I was exercising my executive function while you were talking because for some reason the television turned on and I don't know why. So then I was muting myself, listening to what you were saying, telling the TV to turn off. That is executive function.
I mean, honestly, I don't think I could have done that. That's pretty impressive.
This is just a small example of what happens around here on a daily basis. Anyway, and this honestly, it's funny that would come up, right? That is kind of what's going on in the brains of the kids that you work with, right? It's like they're attending, hearing something in the background. They're trying to do their homework. They put something somewhere. They were distracted. They have no idea where it is. And then the next day they get to the teacher and the teacher says, where's your homework? And they're like, I have no idea. And can you speak to, I'm always curious about this because I say this a lot to parents, which is they're just as horrified as you are about the fact that their homework is lost. Can you just kind of talk about that for a second?
Oh my gosh, totally. I remember when I taught fourth grade, I had this kid in my class named Kevin, and he was like the nicest kid ever, but we didn't really know what it was back then. We didn't really have the term executive functions, but boy, did he have these issues. And I'd call for the homework on a daily basis, and he'd say, oh, all of a sudden, like a complete look of panic on his face. And he'd, Mrs. Dolin, can I go to my cubby? Can I go to my backpack? Sure, Kevin, no problem. And he was like rifling through his papers, desperately trying to find it. And sometimes he could, and sometimes he couldn't. But he pretty much always did it. And he was really upset. Like nobody wants to be that kid. And he was that kid. And his mom would always get mad at him. He looked in class like he didn't care, but he cared deeply. He just didn't have any systems. And so oftentimes when kids actually do their homework, they don't really have a system for where to put it. And every time it's different. And that's what happened to Kevin. So like one day he'd put it in his book. One day he'd just throw it in his backpack. One day he would put it in a folder. One day he would leave it on the counter in the kitchen. And so when you don't have a system, and you're always coming up kind of empty, it looks like it's a character flaw, but it's not. It's an executive function issue.
I'm so glad you said it like that because I was going to say exactly the same thing. This is not a character flaw, as evidenced by the fact that, again, he was as surprised and horrified as you were that it was like yet another day when he hadn't done the thing. And it's interesting that you said he was in fourth grade. By like seventh grade, kids will decide, well, I'm not good at homework, so I'm not doing it. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's fourth grade is this really interesting sweet spot because they're still young enough to want to do the things that we're asking them to do. And they're starting to figure out that they're not good at it, I'm putting that in air quotes, but they haven't quite closed the door yet. Did you find that to be true?
100%. I mean, kids really, really want to please at that age. And when they act like they don't care, it's really not true. They do care. And even in seventh grade, when kids, even if they don't make that conscious effort to do the work, they still deep down care. They still don't like that feeling of, getting a zero or an incomplete or, whatever, not having something when most other kids do. It doesn't feel good as a person, but oftentimes you just get into the cycle of learned helplessness. It's like the doom loop. And when you get a bad grade or you get an incomplete, it doesn't motivate you to say, oh, wait, next time I should try harder. In fact, a lot of these kids, they just put in less effort the next time around because they do get negative feedback. And of course, we know that that results in another missed homework assignment, a late assignment, a bad grade. And just the cycle keeps going. And so kids get into this doom loop and they really, really need help to get out of it. It's not, as you said, it's not an issue of, I don't care, a character flaw, they're lazy. It's none of those things.
Oh my God, my favorite thing, not my favorite thing, is when parents come and they say, I think he's just stubborn or lazy. And it's like, no, there's better reasons for behavior than that.
Sure.
But what is this? So you talked about this doom loop, and I can visualize it very clearly, right? There can be a downward spiral of performance. There can also be an upward spiral of performance. How do you get from one to the other, hopefully from the downward to the upward? Like what do we do?
Yeah, one thing I didn't mention in the downward is that an end result is like a complete and utter lack of confidence. You start to think, I'm never going to be good at this. I stink at school. Why bother? This is too hard. I don't want to do this. So that variable of confidence plays a really important role. And I do believe, and what we don't want to do is say to kids like, oh, try harder. You're actually really smart. You're just as smart as your sister. Like none of those things really work. Do your best is another one. But instead, if it's a subject related issue, an accumulative subject, for example, math, where one skill builds upon another, no matter what you say as a parent, try harder, focus more, pay attention in class, it's not going to fix that fundamental lack of math skill your child might have. They need another adult to step in and say, okay, let's go over this together. Let me shore up these basic skills for you so that you're able to understand the main points of this. Because once kids can get that foundation, they're able to build upon it. But if you're up here just saying try harder and they don't have the skills, it's actually a skill deficit if it's a cumulative subject. And they need a tutor, they need maybe another adult, the teacher, to step in and show them the way. But if it's an executive function issue, that's a little bit different than like a problem with math, but it can still be a skill deficit. Going back to the student Kevin, I bet Kevin, I can just visualize what happened at his house. He didn't have a system, right? And so that's actually a skill deficit too. It just looks different.
That's really interesting, right? So subject matter skill deficits versus kind of executive function skill deficits. And as you were talking, I'm seeing the homework area. I'm guessing this is something that you implement with your clients. Tell us about how you, if you do, teach families about systems around homework at home.
Yeah, it really depends on the age of the child. But I think one mistake we make as parents is as kids get a little bit older, like maybe they're in third grade and they say, I want to do homework and, I want to do homework in my bedroom, Mom. We're like, okay, be independent. But typically the bedroom when you're that age is not a great place. Ideally for parents, if you can have a table, doesn't have to be anything fancy that you buy at IKEA. It just needs to be like a generic table. That's a little bit off the beaten path.
Hmm.
Maybe it's the dining room table in your, obviously your dining room, or maybe a little desk in your home office, whatever. But that should be really for the students' stuff. And they can even have a couple of places. But the idea is that they have a place that's pretty cleared off and they have their supplies there. And in addition, if the child says, I need multiple places, that's okay too. They can have their portable things, and maybe one day it's in the dining room, the next day it's in the kitchen or the home office. But when they're young, not in the bedroom.
So a homework area that's in a common space, not in a highly trafficked area, kind of and a little bit of an away space, but still in public. Yeah, what else? Like an area, anything else that you encourage families to do?
Sure. If that space has their supplies, laid out in an organized fashion, that's great. It should also be cleared off after every homework use every day. The idea is that it should stay tidy. And the reason this is important is because we want kids to know when I'm done with something, it has a place. And as they get older, it will just kind of be part of the routine. When I'm done, I clear off the space and I put things back. You can also get a shower caddy or anything like that. That's like a portable device where kids maybe change locations. They can do that in the same homework period, or maybe one day they're at the dining room table, and then a half hour later they go sit in the home office. That's fine too. Sometimes kids need the novelty of a different place. It doesn't always have to be at the same exact place every day in and day out.
And that's especially important for ADHDers because some of them, at least, are seeking novelty in order to stay engaged, right? And so moving their bodies, changing positions, changing locations. I loved what you said about the shower caddy. A lap desk is also something where, right, that can be, you can sit on the floor, you can sit at the table, whatever you want to do. You can stand up and do it on the counter.
That's exactly right. I had this parent, I remember this, it was about a year ago. This parent said, nope, I have the solution. I told my child that they need to go upstairs in the guest bedroom where it's completely quiet. There are absolutely no distractions, and they're going to stay up there and do their homework. Because to that parent, that's how they focused best, that they needed pure quiet. It was not good for this child. It didn't work out at all. To your point, that kids sometimes need the hum of a busy area. They don't need to be in the thick of things, but sometimes people thrive off of a little something going on. And that's why I believe you see people in adulthood at Starbucks where they've got their laptop and they like have their whole work area set up, because they know there's a little bit more energy than sitting at home alone where there's more distractions. And often, that is a good place for kids. I even see high schoolers in there trying to get their work done because they know, like, I need to be in the hum of a busy area, and I need a place where there aren't other distractions.
Mm-hmm.
Same holds true for homework at home.
Yeah, yeah. Um, when families come to you, what do they? I'm going to ask this question the way I'm going to ask it, and then you turn it into whatever you want. What do they think the problem is, and how do you let them know what the actual problem is?
Well, I've seen that parents have gotten savvier in the last few years. It used to be like, my kid's lazy, they don't care about school, they're hyperactive, they're so distractible. And now they're like, I don't know. I think, like, I've heard this thing called executive functions. And what's also interesting is that, when I was a teacher, I doled out homework left and right. And it was like part of the culture. And then counties started saying, you know what, I think we might be giving too much homework in elementary school. Let's cut back. I think we've almost gone too far. There are a lot of schools that give absolutely no homework until like sixth grade, and then kids go off to middle school pretty unprepared. But nonetheless, even if there's not a lot of homework in elementary school, parents are still saying something's not right. Like, I say, let's get ready for soccer, and they just can't prioritize. I need to do this and that, and then the other thing. And I should have my socks, my shin guards, my cleats. I can't forget my ball. Like, they have no idea. And to top it off, the parent says, okay, and look, Johnny, we're leaving in 20 minutes. They don't have a concept of time. So parents like know, even outside of homework, something's not quite right, but they're not sure, what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. It just makes me think of my daughter, who I walk around still with this list in my purse. It was when she was about 11, getting ready for soccer. She could not remember all the things. She went to practice a bunch of different times without the things. She made herself a list, and it had water at the top, water, shin guards, blah, 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 and water at the bottom, because she would fill up her water bottle and then leave it on the counter. So water was on there twice. What a fantastic workaround.
I so love that. Your daughter is really savvy. I mean, she knew herself. I love that.
Yeah. She knew herself, but I will say we started super early with this kind of thing because we knew she trended a little scattered. We did the neuropsych and got some information about how her brain works at an age when she was then able to incorporate those strategies without resistance. And I think this is the other piece, probably when families come to you, is they've been in a cycle of resistance for quite some time and things have gotten ugly, because if that weren't the case, the parent would be the one who said, hey, I read this really cool thing on executive function. You could have a checklist for your soccer stuff. And the kid is basically like, screw you, mom or dad. I'm not doing that. Mm-hmm. So then you have to come in as an outside person and say, there's this really cool thing called a checklist.
Oh, I know. I remember that happening to me as a parent. It happens to everybody, but that's true. Like when kids are like in first grade, you can totally get away with like, hey, how about a checklist? Oh, okay. But when they're in seventh grade, as you mentioned, I even had this situation with my own son. He's 27 now, but he was in fifth grade, and we had a lot of like, he had a little checklist for going to for practices, and we had a homework routine. So in general, it was going pretty well. But when it came to long-term things, like he would not at all like listen to ideas that I had. And so I tried to get him to keep this little calendar. This was before everything was online. And so he had a monthly calendar, and he would, and I tried to show him how to put down the due date and then break it out into smaller components. But he would say, by the way, he has ADHD, Mom, I got it. I don't need that. I can remember everything. Right, Mom? I'm like, okay. So this went on for a while, and he missed a couple due dates. And I say, well, I think it might be better if somebody helps you with this and not me. He's like, okay, whatever. And so I had one of my tutors come to the house, and she said, well, what if we had this calendar, and we put your due date, and then you broke this down. And he's like, oh, yeah, I think I could do that. And then after the session, I asked him how it went. And he's like, look, Mom, we created this calendar, and see how it works. And it was like pretty much the same thing I had wanted him to do, but it came from somebody else. And as kids get older, to your point, it often comes off better from somebody else.
Yeah. And you know what? Honestly, like, that's okay. Like, I think as parents, we have this like, I must instill all of the lessons in my child. It's not true. Kids, and there's really good research on this actually about other adults in children's lives who are not their parents, helping them with stuff, having a relationship, having a different kind of relationship. And so, lest you think that if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm totally failing as a parent, that is not the case. You can't do all the things.
You can't. And I think we just like beat ourselves up. Like, wow, I should be really good at this, I went to fifth grade. I can do this. And it is just really, really hard. We have such high expectations for ourselves as parents. And, sometimes if we kind of step back and think like, will this really matter in 10 years, whether they got a B or an A on this project? Probably not. But will it matter if I did it for my kid? And the answer is yes, probably. So
say that again, because say that again.
All right. So I was just mentioning that it doesn't like if you like you have to futurize things for your child if they're having a hard time. Does it matter in 10 years if my child got an A or a B on this project? No, it does not. Does it matter if I did the project for my child because he had a meltdown? And yes, it does. Because when we step in and we take that role as a parent of doing things for kids, we're basically saying to the kid, you know what? You can't do this on your own. I got to do this for you. And you're not really that good at it. So, I mean, I'm going to have to like take on this role and do this for you for a while now. And it just isn't good. And that's really going back to the confidence issue that reduces confidence in kids. And so that's the role we don't want to have as parents. We want to think, all right, will this matter in the future? And if we say yes, then we want to take an approach to minimize that.
I love the way you said that. There's a false dichotomy often. And it's funny, I've been saying this a lot lately, but I'll say it again here, which is often we think I have to help them or they will fail. Like there's a lot of either or ring in our minds about lots of different things. And what I like to tell people is if your brain is doing that to you, if your brain is saying, well, either I have to do this whole thing for them or they'll never graduate from high school or they'll never get it done or whatever the thing is, the horrible consequence. If your brain is serving up one or two options only, it is lying to you because there are so many little steps in between. He's going to flunk and I have to do the whole thing so he can pass. Starting with, and maybe not even involving you. Maybe it's I hire a tutor. Maybe it's I talk to the teacher about how to break this down differently and chunk it in smaller chunks. Maybe I talk to the teacher about how to do that. Like again, I just gave you 4 without even trying. And so just this notion of like, I have to do it all or she'll never succeed. It's a lie.
That's such a great point. I've never heard it articulated quite like that, but that's absolutely true. There are lots of in-between ways. And I remember this parent I worked with, this was a while back, and her child, she propped up her child in so many different ways. And she said, well, if I don't do this, he was applying to a private school for high school. And she said, if I don't do this, he won't get the grades that he needs to get into the school. And then she said, but when he gets in, I won't do this anymore. Like I'll step back as a parent. And sometimes we think like this year, I just want him to get through the school year and next year it's going to be different, but it often isn't. So I agree, there's lots of in-between ways where we can say, hey, let me help you get started on this. And then you finish it and you do it on your own. And it's also okay. I know it's like, so like painful to hear this, especially as a parent, to say, you know what, you didn't finish this. I gave you 3 reminders. You're going to have to go to school with it not done. And that's okay too. It's okay because your child is going to have the consequence. And often it just takes a few times of that where the child hears it from the teacher and not just from the parent.
And if that doesn't happen, I want to add a coda because I agree with everything you just said. And if you're stuck in this pattern of like, I gave you the reminders, you didn't do the assignment, you went to school, you had to tell the teacher, blah, 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 rinse and repeat more than, I don't know, a month, 6 weeks, then we got to change something else, right? Because natural consequences are lovely and natural consequences are important. And natural consequences are not always the best way to teach neurodivergent kids skills because of their executive dysfunction, right? That brain coach, that manager voice is like the volume, I have heard it described as the volume's turned way down. And so they're not learning from the natural consequences. They're just feeling worse about themselves. So I just wanted to tag that on there and ask you if you have anything to sort of glom on there.
I'd also say the natural consequences are very inconsistent too. One day the homework counts and you feel bad about yourself because you didn't do it. The next day, the teacher doesn't ask for it. The next day you graded in class and nobody knows. And so when the consequences also aren't consistent, then, that further exacerbates the problem. So I completely agree with you. There is a limit to them.
That's really interesting, actually. And that goes right. It makes me think of intermittent reinforcement, which anyway, that's a different conversation. because that will actually strengthen the not doing.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Um, what else do parents need to know that they don't know about homework, Anne?
I think, I know you work with younger students, and often when homework starts, we want our kids to really do the best they can as parents. And so we like intervene a lot if our child is having a hard time. And what my experience has been in doing this for many, many years is that the more we help, it can actually backfire. And so we want to help, of course, like we want to help our kids understand what they have to do and get started. But the more we sit with our kids and we do the homework for them or with them, it actually has, not great ramifications in the future. So as much as parents can like step back a little bit when kids are young and make it a positive experience, the best they can, that's going to affect motivation more than stepping in and kind of like taking on the role of homework police, poking, prodding, cajoling, rewarding, doing anything you can to get your child to do really two things, to focus and finish. And when you have that role of homework police, nobody's a winner. It's a power struggle. And that's kind of like what you want to resist as a parent of younger kids, because it can get worse as kids get older.
And that's another area where that binary thinking comes into play. It's like, well, either I have to be the homework police, or they'll never learn how to do homework. And again, it's simply not true. Like anytime there's one or two, it's not true. Okay, what else could we do? And then I have coached many parents to call the school, particularly like second, third grade, and be like, so here's the thing, for the next month, we won't be doing homework. Or here's the thing, I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes. He's going to get done in 10 minutes, whatever he can, but we're learning the habit of homework. We're not like caring about the number of worksheets or the number of problems or whatever that happen. And I've told many parents that they're allowed to do that.
They're totally allowed. And you have to let the teacher know too. I remember, Gabrielle, when I was teaching sixth grade, I had gone from being a special education teacher to a general education teacher. And I had a girl in my class, her name was Haley, and she was like a gem. I mean, I loved her. This kid was always prepared. She wanted to learn, like just a great student. And I was super excited to meet her mom in November, when you get like the whole 20 minutes of parent conferences. And so her mom comes in and she sits across from me in the little desk, and she says, let me tell you something. If you don't cut it out with the homework, I'm going to ask for my daughter to be moved from your class. And I said, wait, what? What do you mean? I mean, like Haley's doing a great job. And she said, she's doing 3 hours of homework every night. And I had to take her off the gymnastics team because she cannot do all the homework and do gymnastics. And I said, I am so sorry. I had no idea. I wish you had told me, because that had not been the experience from other kids and the parents I spoke to. And it turns out later on, she was diagnosed with ADHD, and she was having all these problems at home getting the work done. And I had no idea. If the mom had come to me and said, like, this is what's going on, I would have said, hey, oh my gosh, don't worry, just do every other problem. Do the first 10, work on this for a half hour, like those types of things, or let me see what's really happening in class. But when you send your child back to school the next day with perfect homework, no mistakes, like everything's great, the teacher has no idea what happens at home. And they really need to know if your child's really struggling.
Yeah, I think, yes. And anytime, it's funny because I get called in a lot when there's a discrepancy between home and school. So, and in either direction, kid looks like an angel at home and is terrible at school, or looks like an angel at school and is behaving terribly at home. Anytime that's happening, that's a stress signal. There is distress in the system, and all the people who are interfacing with that child need to know about that. There's a reason for it, and we need to figure out what it is. And so, yeah, if you are listening to this and you're a parent and your kid is struggling at home with homework, reach out to the teacher. They might not know. Give them some slack.
Yeah. And a teacher will come up, I remember brainstorming with this parent, and it was beyond me modifying things like, just do half of this. but when she told me what was happening, I gave her some strategies and we were like a team. We collaborated and it got so much better for her.
Yeah.
And, the teacher is on your side, but sometimes as a parent, when you come in, if you come in with guns blazing, like this is what happens at home and it's all your fault, like it just puts you at odds. But if you can use the words I've noticed Haley's having a hard time with this. Do you have any suggestions? I've noticed it seems to be taking her a long time to do this math. Like as a teacher, I'm like, oh, you've noticed that? Oh, sometimes I see that in class too. Hey, let's work together on this. And the way in which you approach the teacher is just like really important, in my opinion.
Yeah, because they're people too, and they have a lot of kids to look after.
Yeah.
And yes, we can, and we will do much better when we afford people some compassion and some grace. I think that's true of all people,
Totally.
including our children and
Yes.
ourselves.
That is so true.
And if people want to learn more about you and what you do, what should they do?
Sure. Our website is ectutoring.com. The name of my company is Educational Connections, and we provide executive function skills coaching, tutoring for subjects like math and science and reading and writing. As kids get older, the SAT and the ACT, and then we help kids with the college admissions process.
Amazing. And we will link to that in the show notes. And Dolin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for allowing me to come on your show.